Hello, and welcome to Real Estate Today. My name is Ed Cox. My co-host is Maria Babicki, and we have a great show planned for you today. We really do have something special today. We've been hoping to get our guest on for well over a year. The services and business that he does is in high demand these days, and we're lucky to have him. Maria and I just visited his business a couple weeks ago, and well before the auctions that were taking place, the place was jamming. I thought it was busy, and this was even the preliminary. I look forward to going out and visiting him on a Thursday night and see this business in operation. The reason why we're having him here today is that us, as Maria and I, as real estate agents, we've just, in fact, are going to go look at a home tomorrow where the people have lived in their house for 50 years. And they have collected items over the years. And the woman is moving into another home, and the husband has passed away. And they have just so much stuff. The kids live out of town, and they're anxious to get their house sold. So that's a service that this gentleman does. It's also for all of us baby boomers, and there's lots of us out there who have our own homes, and we've lived in them I've lived in mine for 25 years, and I've collected a bunch of stuff, some of which might be valuable, probably not, but I have no idea. Some things that I think I could throw out might be valuable, and I have no idea. That's sometimes a good idea to have an expert in. But those of us who have parents and we just don't have the time or the skills or the wherewithal to get out and get rid of stuff. So the house could be filled with empty paint cans and valuable painting in the same room. So we're excited to have this our guest on today, and I think instead of me talking, we should hear from him. So Maria, could you introduce our guest and get the show started?
Sure, I'd love to. Our guest today is Ralph Labozzo from Golden Gavel. He is an auctioneer and appraiser. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ed and Maria. I appreciate being here.
Great.
So we'd like to hear right from you what it is your company does and what do you do there?
Sure. I'm an auctioneer and appraiser, and what we do is really, we're an auction company, but I really like to think that we're more of a service company. The more, in the 15 years I've been doing this full time, it's most important to listen to your client. What's the client asking of you? And then fulfill those needs. Like, for example, you folks are going to be seeing a client that's lived in a home for 50 years. They're overwhelmed. They've spent 50 years accumulating these things, good, bad, and ugly, And then in addition, there's a death of a loved one. There's a death of a spouse mixed in. So then you have to be so cognizant of that when you walk through the home. What we do is the first thing really is, do we need to do an appraisal for the family? Is the probate court asking for an appraisal? That would be one of the services that we would provide. But first and foremost would be a simple house call. There's no fee, no obligation. We would literally walk through the house and we would give guidance saying, there's a painting that I may need to do more research, but my eye is telling me that that's a good painting to put to auction. Or there may be things that were once very valuable, and now, the pendulum collectively is now kind of going out of vogue. And I would say, geez, folks, what's your expectation? I love to hear from the client. They may say, Ralph, if I can't get $1,000 for this item, I don't want to sell it. And I'd be like, oh, I'm glad we had that conversation because I can't get more than $200 for it. So therefore, fair market value is telling me, leave it be. So all of that comes into play with the initial meeting at the house with the client to see what their needs are and how we could fulfill those needs.
Okay. Could you tell us about your background, because you're very interesting. I mean, you're a CPA and you have a MBA from UConn.
I do, yeah.
So how did you get into this?
I kind of changed roles over time. My youngest memory is listening to my uncle in New Hampshire call auctions. He was an auctioneer and surveyor and real estate broker. So he did many different things, and from a young child, listening to his chant, that really did it for me. But growing up, I went through schooling, and I went to UConn undergraduate, and I had a store for a couple, 3 years in Stamford. It was, I'd like to say it was an antique store, but it was really a used furniture / collectible store in Stamford. And I did that for a couple of years, and I enjoyed it. I made enough money to get by, but what I learned was I was pretty good at the accounting function. So I went back to UConn, I got my MBA with accounting specialization. I sat 4 times and I finally got through the CPA exam. I joined Arthur Andersen. I did that for 3 years. I loved the clients. I hated the travel that I had to do. And then finally I said, you know, life's too short not to pursue what your passion is. And I decided at that point in my life that I would go back to school. I took a 9-month program at Sotheby's to learn antiques and fine art and furniture from who I really believe is the best, Sotheby's Auctions in New York. And then also, in addition, I had gone to Missouri Auction School to learn auctioneering. And it was at that point in my life, say 15, 16 years ago, that I joined Patrick, who owns Gavel, and I became his auctioneer and appraiser and never looked back. So that's a little bit about my background.
Cool.
That's fascinating.
So I think it must be helpful that you have an accounting background when it comes to appraising and doing other things.
It's helpful, and and just negotiating skills and just trying to see where the client's coming from and seeing, it makes me feel good to help the client, because so often they're overwhelmed with grief and they don't know where to turn, and I love being helpful in that, being part of the solution rather than the challenge or the problem, And when the end of the day, when the dumpster's full and the house is cleaned out and they get their check and they're satisfied, there's nothing better than having a smiling client at the end of the day. We want to make friends, not enemies, and life's too short, not to do the right thing.
Now, we happen to be filming this show on a Thursday, and Thursdays are a very special day for you. Can you tell us what happens at Golden Gavel in East Windsor?
Oh, sure. So we run a weekly Thursday night, what we call an estate auction. So we'll do about 700-800 lots tonight, and a lot could be everything from a lawnmower to a bedroom set to a fine piece of jewelry to a piece of art. And we have preview time starting at 2 p.m. And so from 2 p.m. on, the public is just wandering around, taking notes, looking at the things that we have for auction this evening. And then 5:30, we do what's called an early bird auction, and that's conducted as a walk around. So literally, the public walks along with the auctioneer, and we're selling things in place. And that's mostly tools, appliances, electronics. And then at 7 o'clock, if there's any estate vehicles, we would settle the estate vehicles at 7, and then everything else you can imagine out of a person's home, be it artwork, jewelry, furniture, toys, collectibles, anything like that would be sold at 7. And then it runs until about 11 o'clock. And the beauty for me is, you walk in at 2 o'clock and you see this whole place filled with stuff. And then at midnight, you look again and it's all gone. It's all been sold to the highest bidder.
And just for clarification, when you say you walk in there, this is an old supermarket. So this isn't a small, so you have to, I couldn't believe how much stuff was in there. I was really surprised by that. So this isn't any small little, there's more than one household worth of, how many?
Yes, Ed. Usually, and we go by letter code, so you could kind of tell how many consigners or estates we're representing by how many letters are out. And it's a big auction where there's double A, double B, double C, because we've exhausted the alphabet, right? And so, a lot of times we'll have definitely, multiple families or estates represented in one sale, and it works. We try to, so if we have a Victorian home and another Victorian home, then it would make sense to sell those together. Same holds true if there's newer furniture, say from IKEA or something of that nature, to try to save those houses for one night as well, to make it a destination.
You recently just had a Lego event?
Oh, amazing. There was a family, and the attorneys called us in. They says there's 3 bedrooms of Legos. So I says, okay, well, what does that really mean? Well, from floor to ceiling, there were Lego systems A lot of them, many of them, still in the original boxes. Some of them in the original shipping boxes, never opened by the client. So, and I love collectibles, so I was all over that. I totally enjoyed that time in the house. The clients were wonderful. The attorneys that were representing the clients were, everything was in line, you know. And so we had the opportunity to sell that collection this past Saturday night, and I was amazed. You know, Lego systems will always keep their value, but people really see them as investment grade items. And there were some Star Wars sealed sets that were doing between $3,000 and $5,000 for one set of Legos, plastic building blocks. And yet people perceive them, and they do have intrinsic value. And it was just amazing for me as auctioneer to be able to host such an auction for the family, and as well as for ourselves.
Now, approximately how old were those pieces that were getting $3,000 to $5,000?
Not necessarily, and that's really great question, Maria, because these were things that were created in the 1980s, say. They're not necessarily what we call antique, by antique, 100 years old and handmade. And that's where a lot of people say, well, we don't have any antiques, so there's probably no value in the house. No. You know, it doesn't have to be. A lot of times the antiques aren't bringing the money that they used to say 20 years ago. It's more the collectibles that are bringing the money. What we call the smalls in the marketplace, the little things that are easily transportable or transferable that are bringing the money, just like the Lego systems. Comic books. There was a comic collection that, you know, not only Legos that night, but the series The Walking Dead. This individual had collected the first 15 books of that comic, for which the movie series is based on. That comic collection brought $1,000 at the auction that night. You know, and that was something where the person is investing his or her money because it's probably going to escalate over time. Rather than buying stocks, they're buying comic books today.
Speaking of the Legos, that one probably brought a crowd from further away than
What we did for that sale was we actually had a host come in, and so we were live online as well as being in East Windsor. So the first 150 lots were offered through liveauctioneers.com, and we were getting bidding literally all over the world. Brazil, Italy, France, all had people bidding online at Golden Gavel at the same time on their computers. Okay. So it was amazing.
But that was a special auction. That wasn't the typical Thursday auction.
That's correct, Maria. On the quarters, we try to do a specialty auction where we'll do, you know, around, say, a book collection or a toy collection or a doll collection or a teddy bear. And that was our specialty toy/Lego systems auction for this quarter.
On a given Thursday night, how far would you say people come from there?
Again, you know, because our web designer puts mostly everything online now for us, so there's at least photographs online for the things that we're auctioneering. I would say, you know, all over the world, but Boston to New York, definitely, that whole corridor of buyers will come on a weekly basis, depending on what we have, if there's something of interest to them. And we also allow telephone bidding as well as absentee bidding. So we'll give a condition report, and if they're comfortable with that, they could leave a private bid with us for us to execute on their behalf.
Okay. You were talking about antique items, and that it's just not antiques that people are looking for, it's collectibles. Now, when we interviewed you, you shared so much interesting information, and one of the things was about some IKEA furniture. Oh. Can you tell our viewers about that?
Yeah, there was a family that was moving to Germany, and they bought mostly for their home IKEA furniture. So I was the one that was fortunate to go to do their house call, and I walked through and I says, folks, you know, you bought IKEA. You know, it's beautiful form over substance. This stuff isn't made to last, unfortunately. So long as your expectations aren't very high, we could help you. And they're like, again, listen to the client. We're going to Germany. We don't care. It's all got to go. We got to get this house ready for the realtor. Okay, well, listen to them. Okay, so the night of the auction, they're cracking up, and I says, oh, you know, it's such a joy to be at the podium and see happy consigners. So we take a break eventually, and I go up to them. I said, so folks, you're happy with the results? And they're saying, the stuff is bringing about, on average, 20% more than what we paid. So they were delighted with us. And here I am saying, again and again, I'm reminded, it doesn't have to be antique to be valuable. It doesn't have to be old to retain its value, to have intrinsic value for resale.
The one, and that brings up a point that you made with us at our meeting, was that you have young couples who are trying to outfit an apartment, or instead of maybe going to IKEA or buying some disposable furniture, they can come to you and buy.
Ed, exactly that. It's a niche that we never really sought, and yet they're finding us, where newlyweds will go to a department store or furniture store, and they'll get shell-shocked by the price, and then they'll find their way to us and say, well, if you're okay with a nick or a scratch or a blemish, you could get things maybe 15-20% on the retail dollar, and they're excited about it, and then they tell their friends, and before you know it, we have a whole niche of class of people that we never really marketed to, and yet here they are on a weekly basis.
Now, certain items are hot and certain items are soft. So what are some hot items right now?
Right now, vintage toys, and by vintage, I'm talking from like 1980s Lego systems and Transformer robots, and then earlier. Vintage toys, love selling them. You know why? You don't have to break your back. It's not like a marble top Victorian bedroom set that you have to bring down, 3 flights of stairs. They're very lightweight, and yet they bring as much as, say, a Victorian parlor set or a Victorian bedroom set would bring today's dollars, especially if they're mint in the original boxes. That has tremendous value to a purist collector. Comic books. Comic books are bringing all the money, like we had talked about the Walking Dead collection that we sold this past Saturday. And again, that was 2003 when that comic book came out. So $1,000 for the first 15 books, you say, wow, if you put that money in a bank, which you were to take it out today, would you get that amount of money? So it's something where it's fun and yet, it's also profitable. So I would say toys, comic books, items from the Art Deco period, the 1920s, 30s, very, very sought after and collectible. Those type of things would be cherished to a family, and we love to sell them at auction. Then the reverse holds true. Then the question being asked is, what used to be hot and is now not? And I would say, you have a whole category of collectors that used to love early American press glass, Depression era glassware, the blues, the pinks, the cobalt colored glassware. Now I call it depressing glass because it doesn't bring what it should, and yet you could go to a price guide and it'll say, well, this teacup is worth $35, and yet we'll have a whole box lot of this Depression era glassware doing $35. Why? I really feel is those collectors are passing away, and there's no new ranks of collectors filling the void, and so the price, it's all supply and demand. There's too much of a supply, not enough of demand, so the price gets suppressed.
So you think in that case you might hold on to these if you are able to, and it might come back at some point?
Great point, Maria. Yes, I tell, because part of what I do, I wear many hats, what I've been doing a house call, and one of it is, I look at it as if I own the things. How would I want to be treated? And if I know for a fact that things are really not bringing the money, I want to tell my client that. And if they're not burdened where they have to make a sale this week or this month, I say put it aside, put it in storage. If a family member or a friend expressed interest, I'd rather see them take enjoyment out of that than us bringing it to auction, going through the movements, and it bringing very little money.
Right. Now, what are you personally interested in? What do you collect?
I love, there's one company that really does it for me. It's the Frank Art Company that operated in New York City in the 1920s. And so, actually, one of my first purchases as a picker was, my family for fun on the weekends would take me to tag sales. That would be our thing. And I would have paper route money, and I would try to turn my paper route money into buying sprees. And the first things I learned were comic books. So I have quite a collection of comic books that I amassed as a kid. And then the other thing was, I had gone to a tag sale with my father, and there was a $5 lamp. And it was two beautiful ladies that were on either side of the lamp, but there was a break in between. I says, I have to have that lamp. And my father was just like, it's broken. I have to have it. So I bought it, and then as I got older, I learned more about it. It said Frank Art Incorporated, patent applied for. It was a legitimate Frank Art lamp. And when I went to Yukon to raise money, I sold it at a flea market for $700. Well, I wish I could buy it now for $1,400. It's the type of thing where I sold it because I needed to at that moment in time, but wouldn't I like to have it back in my collection? Right now, I have a few pieces of Frank Art, one being the Three Graces, and maybe in another show I'll bring this. It's an ash stand that stands about 2-3 feet tall, and it's three ladies holding up a pottery ash ball. And the ash ball is by the Fulper Pottery Company. So you have companies helping each other. Frank Art is basically metalworks, and then they would hire out another company to do what they're not skilled at, saying a pottery ash ball. So that's something nice that I have maybe for a future show.
We have some items here that...
Oh yeah, if you'd like to talk about
This will be our
these.
Antiques Roadshow right here.
Yeah, Connecticut version. So here, we're talking about comic books, right? And for collectors, there's really different periods of time for comic books that they would collect under. You have the Golden Age, which is the 1950s, the Silver Age, which is your 1960s books, the Bronze Age, which is 1970s, which this comic book represents, and then Modern Age, which would be 80s up to today. So this I brought from my own collection. This is a 1970 book, Conan the Barbarian. And one of the things that you notice right from the top is it's 15 cents. So it's an older book. I mean, to manufacture this today would probably be $3, $2.95, say. Issue number 1, 1970. And actually, we're the same age. I don't know who's doing better, me or Conan at this point. But I would say Conan. For collectability, you want to have them in sleeves to protect them, and then backing boards. Very important for comic books. So it's archival safe, meaning it'll stand the test of time. So this book is very sharp. You see the corners, you see the coloration. And Conan as a character, being a barbarian, he's a very intelligent barbarian. So it's almost like nobility and barbarian mix. So he knew right from wrong and chose right. So it's actually a good message for children back in the 70s as well as today. And in terms of value, this book would be somewhere between $200 and $300, given the condition.
Did you buy this new as a child, or did you trade this as an adult?
This was something I bought as a young child. This was something that I probably bought in probably about like 80, 81. Mm-hmm. So still before it really had market value, but at a time where I was collecting comic books.
Okay.
And then for fun, looking at other things of value, the Art Deco period is very much in vogue today, and so I brought a print from a very well-known artist at the time, Maxfield Parrish, and his life dates are from 1870 to 1966, so he lived a very long life. And he was born and raised in Pennsylvania, and then really spent time in the East Coast, Massachusetts, and different areas. But you have what's called the Parrish Blues. And in the deep, rich cobalt blue of Maxfield Parrish. And also to bring out, he was a commercial illustrator, so he did covers for Life magazine, Harper's Bazaar, so many different, covers. And because of his long life, I mean, really for the first 50 years of the 20th century, 1900, 1950, I mean, he was producing wonderful art. And this is what is called Dinky Bird, from an illustration that he did for a children's poem book. And this was done in 1904. This has the original Art Deco frame. And if you look, what's really cool for a purist is the backing is still intact. So you could see, the original title here, Where the Dinky Bird is Singing, so this by Maxfield Parrish. So it's all legitimate and correct. It's never been changed or repurposed.
So this is an illustration.
This would have been, yeah, a print of an original work by Maxfield Parrish. But in and of itself, this was done, say, in the 19-teens, and having survived up to 2016 in this condition, would really do it for the right collector. And this is actually, our auction code, because I borrowed it. It's going to be in actually tonight's auction, but I wanted something cool to bring for the show. So this. And then in addition, from the same estate, which I thought really would do it for a purist collector, is a check drawn from Maxfield Parrish to his assistant and also his model, Sue Lewin, for $82 back in the 1920s. So for a purist collector that loves Maxfield Parrish's artwork, they would also love to have his autograph or signature, which is right here.
How
Yeah,
neat
I was
is
looking
that?
at it and go, well, it's a check. Who cares? But it has his signature on it, which is his autograph. And I get it now, but I didn't get it then.
So what would you expect at the auction for these two items?
We'll be offering them separately. For Dinky Bird, I would put, again, the prices are somewhat suppressed right now. What would have been, say, a $200 to $400 print, I think today's money is probably $100 to $200. And for the check, I'm hoping that it brings somewhere between $200 and $400 for the family that we're representing.
Okay. All right. As our show is winding down, there is one thing we've been hoping that you could do, and you've used the term before, but we didn't know what it was till we saw you. Chant.
Sure, Maria. Yeah. So when you go to auctioneering school, they teach you tongue twisters. One of them is this. Betty bought some butter, but she said this butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. So she bought a bit of better butter, put it in her bitter batter, made her bitter batter better, so 'tis better. Betty bought a bit of better butter. And from there, hey, 50, I bet 75, 100, I bet 1 1/4, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 1/2, 175, bit 2, 200, bet 2, 2 1/4, wait, 2 1/4, 2 to bit 2 1/4, 2 to bit 2 1/4, last call, 2 1/4. So $200, Maria, what's your number? Just like that.
So how long did it take you to perfect this?
Well, it takes a lifetime. Your chant is something of your own,
Yeah.
so you practice constantly until you get it where you want it to be.
Okay.
Are there rock star auctioneers?
Well, a lot of times for the car auctions, you'll see, and there are, contests and, auctioneers for each state, So I've never really got involved in that end of it. But definitely, for especially some of the classic car auctions, you'll have auctioneers flying all over, the world to participate in an auction.
So we're at the tail end of our show, and this has been so enjoyable for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have anything you'd like to stress to our viewers?
Well, thanks, Maria. I mean, I would say, as a service business, really it's 5 points that we like to stress. Appraisals, if needed for the families, if they're dealing with a probate situation, or for insurance purposes. Family distribution of items, if there's something that is meaningful for a family member to keep. Auction of the things that we're meant to auction. Donation, if there's something of, say, lesser value that we wouldn't want to put to the auction, but it should be donated. And finally, if needed by the realtors, broom clean the house. So all of those services in one.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming here. And we have to have you back because there's much more. We're just touching the surface here.
Great.
So thank you for coming, and we'd like to thank all our viewers for tuning in to Real Estate Today. We've had an enjoyable show, and we hope you like it too, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Ed, for having me.